exposing the truth behind the lies, and fighting for the freedom of awareness. The Lost Generation just found its voice. America's first competition talk show. You're in the hub.
Good morning to you. It is Monday, May 10th, and glad to have you aboard on the Hub Internet Show. I'm joined all this week by Damon and Jared and Tom on the Hub Internet Show. You can vote, by the way, for whether Damon or whether Tom won the face-off debate on last Wednesday's program. Go back, watch the video, post your comments in the YouTube section. Tom wants to stump for himself.
And remember, I took the harder position. I had the easy shot. I could take an easy side. I take the harder one. I take the harder one to defend.
He's
hard.
a wuss.
Yeah, hard. You'll understand the euphemism when you go and watch the video. Post your comment in the YouTube video, and we'll let you know Wednesday on the show.
Somebody eat Tom.
Here's the thing. Right now, there's discussion about the idea that our former President George W. Bush may be ready to make a comeback. There's a book coming out that he's coming out with this fall. Laura Bush has got her book coming out in the very near future, and that with the sour grapes feeling that the country has right now about President Obama's policies, not necessarily President Obama's personality, because God knows he's a great stand-up comic. We saw that last week at the White House press dinner. That George W. Bush may be teeing up for a comeback. Do you guys see this happening? Is it right around the corner? Is history smiling upon him now? Jared?
I don't know that it's right around the corner, but I do think that ultimately history is not going to view him as the worst president ever. After all, we do have from our grand state of Georgia, the peanut farmer, Jimmy Carter, who absolutely has to be the worst president in the 20th century, and we'll go ahead and give him the aughts of 2000 as well. There's no way that Bush is going to fall to that level. But right now he's looking pretty bad, and he's due for something to come back.
Yeah. Mr. God forbid, there are lines halfway around the block for gasoline right now, and the price is through the roof. Let me call my brother who owns a fuel station down in South Georgia, because he knows how to fix energy policy worldwide. He owns a gas station. Tom?
I think the problem that George W. Bush is going to have is that when historians, and I was a history major, when people write history in the future, they're going to look at what it was written in the newspapers. They're going to look at original sources, and all the original sources they're going to have is they're going to talk about what a buffoon he is and what an idiot. And I don't really think you're going to see a lot of future positive things written about him. I think you might get that one book by some historian, 60 years, who's going to be trying to go out on his own and go against the current tide, but I don't think he's going to be warmly, although honestly, I don't think he'll be remembered like most of the presidents are, unremembered and forgotten.
I think it's without a doubt he will go down as the worst president in our lifetime. I think he will. I don't know if you would say surpass Jimmy Carter. He will underpass Jimmy Carter and take the position as or be perceived to be the worst president. Because if you think about it, you look at his presidency, with the exception of his war on terror, which I absolutely agree with him 100%, going into Iraq, every other policy this man made at this point, and I can see for the foreseeable future, has been incredibly unpopular. If you look at how he unfunded the old people prescription bill, I forget what you called it.
Medicare Part D.
Medicare Part D. You look at the economy. This is, again, whether you agree or not that the president has a lot of impact on the economy, the fact is he was the president at the time, and we experienced probably the worst economic situation we've ever had.
And a lot of folks say that the real reason behind this was that President Bush never saw a veto pen that he knew how to use. And the reason being because he felt like in order to win congressional support for the war ongoing, which he saw as his legacy, he could not risk that by vetoing any of these things. So it was spin until you're red in the blue in the face.
Yeah, and that's what he did. He did a lot of spending, and that's what's ultimately there's the two George Bushes. There's the George Bush of 9/11, and then there's the George W. Bush that spent everything into oblivion.
Like the George Bush with the bullhorn better.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And one of the things too is Medicare Part D. While I'm not a fan of any welfare program at all, the Medicare Part D is the only one that's ever actually come in on its budget. But with them taking out the donut hole is the whole reason why it comes in the budget, because it incentivized people to not spend a lot on their drugs and to only spend on what they needed. Taking away the donut hole that we've just gotten with the healthcare reform bill is going to completely destroy that program. So the one thing that the leftists might actually like in history is probably going to run into the grave.
Well, and you say leftists in history. They said that 61% of historians disapprove, things that he'll be one of the worst presidents in U.S. history. Now, those same historians went on to say that it may be decades before they can analyze a president's impact objectively, which basically means that historians are great at being subjective, which tells me that either they surveyed all revisionist historians, or that historians are revisionists in general, or that history's just all over the map. Which I tend to side with the latter pun. Jared?
Yeah, and who studies recent history, whatever you're studying history anyways? There's no current event, or maybe there is. There's a current events class for people to get their credit, but that's about it.
All history is mothballs. Yeah. Live in the moment. Tom?
Well, I mean, the thing of it is, to talk about greatness or being a good president or not, I think it's pretty irrelevant because, Herbert Hoover, presided over the 29 crash in 1929. What can people tell you about Herbert Hoover? I would tell you, if you ask people on the street who is Herbert Hoover, they get blank stare back. Calvin Coolidge. Well, I can't even tell you anything that Calvin Coolidge did. I know Woodrow Wilson was in office during World War I.
Well, Tom, we have general pieces of nuggets about presidents. We may not be able to recount their entire term, but we certainly have pieces of information. And
unfortunately
for President Bush, those nuggets are going to be negative.
Although I wouldn't say that they would. I think if he's remembered for anything, he'll be remembered for creating democracy in Iraq.
Yeah, it's Iraq or bust for him. That's what it is.
The verdict is out even on that one at this point. I think
it's the war terror in Iraq.
You can thank the generals, but time will tell, because I am still of the opinion that Afghanistan was a good war, Iraq was a bit of a misguided war, and Iran would have been the place we would have gone had we been very serious about fighting Islamic influences and jihadist influences in the Middle East.
Yes.
And I do not believe. I think that honestly, it was putting the cart before the horse.
Although I don't think you could have gone into Iran without creating a world war involving the Middle East versus the West,
which would have been the point. Smoke them out.
Well, we could argue on, was it misguided? Should he have gone here versus there? But as Jared brought up, he was a much better 9/11 president. That was really his claim to fame, was the getting on the bullhorn.
Well, you can make the case that he held the recession off after 9/11, because we should have been into. We had a recession after 9/11.
Well, and the other thing,
you could make the case he held it off till the end of
the employment until you expire this year. Thank you, Obama.
The Bush employment numbers were higher than the Clinton employment numbers
and all that was great. But then you have to go back to the last 6-8 months of his term, where we just had an absolute economic collapse.
Well,
he has to be held accountable for that.
Let's read some of these numbers. The gross federal debt in fiscal 2001, Bush's first year as president, was around $5.7 trillion. It was $9.9 trillion by the time he left in 2008. Obama's budget is projecting that it'll be around $16.3 trillion by the end of his first term. So, he escalated the pace.
I think there's one more aspect of George W. Bush that we're overlooking here, and what may ultimately come from his legacy is the Tea Party movement, because he was actually the final Republican president to push everybody over the edge, and it made Republicans say, "I've had enough with this stupid party, and we're going to straighten them out."
But you're making the point that he's a bad president because he forced even conservatives to say, "God, we don't want this guy."
Because he's a good president, but it's clear as mud.
I think that people will look at him, the public will look at George W. Bush based on the prism of today. So how good or bad Barack Obama does will be how people judge Bush. If the employment numbers stay continually bad during the Barack era, and we start seeing more terrorism, people are going to say, "Wow, boy, I wish I could go back to the George W. Bush era."
I look back to him. The real story, reading this story, the real story is the story behind the story. I still want to know how CNN had him gaining 10 percentage points in popularity after his first year, and Fox News, he lost 11 points. Twilight Zone. See you tomorrow on the Hub.